Well, we're heading down to Steve's again.
We are.
He's still rebuilding the railroad that he started tearing apart some time back. And we wanted to show you the progress on his On30, On30 railroad that's being rebuilt.
Yes.
Check this out. Well, Steve's been working on this railroad for decades and decades.
Since he was 2 years old.
Since he was 2 years old. It used to be in the living room.
Oh, really?
And he decided to move it up to the attic. And this is Al, and Al moved in a few years back after his divorce, and they've worked on the railroad together, and just all the time, up here working all the time on this railroad.
That's neat.
Of course, we've featured the railroad a whole bunch of times here on the show, and it got larger and larger and larger. And better and better and better. Finally ending up, I think, personally, one of America's great model railroads.
Oh, no kidding.
Keep in mind that everything on this railroad is scratch-built except the locomotives.
That's just amazing.
And the locomotives themselves are cobbled together out of other locomotives and locomotive kits and that sort of thing. Now, originally it was an ON3 railroad, 3-foot gauge, but over time he's switched to ON30. Now, if you've been following the saga of Steve's railroad, you know that about a year and a half ago, he decided to tear the whole thing apart and move.
Yeah, I was just shocked.
We were all shocked. He called up one day with pictures of this, saying, "Look what I did." Floored. We were just absolutely floored that he was tearing this whole thing up. But, well, Al had passed away in the middle of the night, and Steve wasn't feeling well, and his leg was bothering him. He could hardly walk, and he just said, "I'm done. I'm just done."
But the problem I have...
So he started the process of taking all of the structures off the railroad and selling them to people. A lot of these he turned into dioramas and then sold the dioramas. This building was always one of my favorites, so I bought it. I bought these two buildings, actually.
I'm glad, too.
And there they are. They're still on the workbench. I'm not quite sure what we'll do with them, but I just couldn't let these go. They were too precious to me. And then we also ended up with the entire High Street off of the railroad. Steve gave it to us.
I know. I was so tickled.
Oh, wow. What can I say? Wow. And it's all wired with a power supply and everything. And what a treasure. What a gem. Steve took this to the narrow gauge convention and entered it in the contest.
Yes.
We frankly demanded it. We said, that's got to go in the contest.
Right.
And so there it was at the narrow gauge convention, if you saw it there. You know, the upper part of that railroad, Steve always called the Durango and Phoenix.
Right.
I got it out of a book. But the name fits now.
It sure does.
Because like the Phoenix, the railroad is rising from the ashes.
Oh.
And he's building it out of some of the stuff that he didn't get rid of, and some of the stuff from old railroads, and some stuff that Al built years ago that we had stored. And,
right.
And he's cobbling it together. But new rules. Nothing that you can't just get to.
I've been saying that for years because the idea of climbing up on a ladder doesn't turn me on at all.
Well, this whole thing is inspired by the fact that he got a new hip.
Yes.
And I understand because I just got a new hip a week ago.
Right.
What we didn't expect to happen is 6 weeks out when we scheduled my surgery to find out just a few weeks later that you were going to need surgery.
Yeah, my doctor's like, now.
So we almost had matching hospital rooms.
Yeah. Different hospitals, but the same
It's beginning
floor.
to look a lot like surgery. What a way to spend Christmas. Anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
We're feeling much better, needless to say, even though I'm only a week out of having.
You're a week and I'm 2 weeks. 2 week.
But new rules apply on both our railroad and his railroad. Nothing you can't reach easily.
That's
no
right.
ladders, no stools, no steps, no reaches, no anything. So the new version of the railroad, first of all, it's all going to be 30-inch gauge now. And it's all going to be very, very accessible.
Yes.
And so check this out. The railroad's going back together. So our real purpose with this show is to show you the progress on the layout.
Right.
This is the new area. Now, this is part of the old original railroad that runs along the outside walls. About half of this is all new because that all got torn out. But the bulk of the new railroad lives on this long peninsula that runs right up the middle of the room. And he's just getting it to the point now where it's beginning to work. He's got most of the track down, not all, but most of the track down and all the wiring in place. And we're finally running trains again.
Yes.
Now, all the new section is 30-inch gauge, meaning that he's been tearing out some of the 36-inch gauge. And this area here where it ties into the old railroad is still in 36-inch gauge. And his plan is to rip all that track out and start over in 30-inch gauge. All that hand-laid track and soldered, and anyway, he's going to tear it all out and start over.
It looks like he's running really well. Look at that.
Yeah, all this new section, he's been working now for weeks on just dialing the track work in. That's what happens with new track work. But he's going through and testing and running back and forth and back and just making sure everything runs perfectly. Now, while he's still scratch building everything other than the locomotives, at this point he's just buying locomotives. This is a pretty much stock Bachmann logging locomotive, 30-inch gauge. But he's just much more interested in building structures, his favorite thing, and building rolling stock, probably his second favorite thing.
And of course the scenery too.
Well, yeah, it's got to be all new scenery.
That's right.
He actually managed to save a little bit of the scenery, and we've got a video up on how he went about doing that. But here on the peninsula, all new. We had to start all over with new bench work, new track work, new scenery, everything. Now, one thing about the old railroad that always struck people were the bridges and structures, that sort of thing. All, again, scratch built. And there were, what did he say? It was like 150?
Something like that.
150 scratch. And, well, then he just kept scratch building structure upon structure upon structure. But I think when he started tearing it apart, there was over 150 scratch built structures on the railroad. It got to the point where there was railroad tucked into every nook and cranny of the room. There was no place left to put railroad. It was up on the beams and everything. Now, these are some structures that Al built for a railroad years and years ago, the MRS Railroad. And, well, after Al passed away, we kind of ended up with a whole bunch of his buildings. And we put up a show about maybe turning all of this into a model railroad, the accidental railroad, but we have so many projects.
We do.
And I just couldn't see building this. So I offered it to Steve. I said, if there's anything here you want, take it. It's yours. And he did.
Yes.
So actually, a lot of these structures that are going on to the new peninsula, I call it now the Al-Ninsula.
The Al-Ninsula.
The Al-Ninsula. Because a lot of these structures were actually built by Al years and years ago for a different railroad, the MRS Railroad. And Steve had built a lot of structures for the MRS as well. And he still has those. And some of those are finding their way onto the Al-Ninsula.
The new section appears to be looking just like the old railroad did.
Yeah, it's definitely a Steve railroad.
It is his style.
His style. He's just got this way of building these neat little neighborhoods and scenes. Now here's one of my favorite buildings from the old railroad, the power plant.
Oh, mine too.
Isn't that amazing? But
really cool.
he decided to sell it, and so he did.
But if you want just that one, or if you want them both, you're welcome to them both. Because they were kind of made to go sort of
They kind of
together.
were, and I'm thinking I would take them.
Know that those two pearls on the top of the generators are 12 volt.
But actually, that power plant was the second one he'd built. The first one was
Really?
on the MRS railroad.
Oh.
And he thought he had it down in the basement somewhere, and you know what? He did. It was covered in about a foot of dust, but there it was, down in the basement.
Well, that's awesome.
So he dug that out, and he's going to use that on the new section as well. So in a way, he got his power plant back.
That's true.
It's different, but the same. Now, of course, when you repurpose these structures, you have to chop them up and change them. They're not going to fit exactly onto the layout the way you want them to. So a lot of these buildings have been cut down and modified pretty extensively, and the power plant is no exception. But look at the beautiful scratch building.
I don't see how. I mean, that's marvelous.
Isn't that
Wow.
And it's progressed to the point now where he's beginning to work on dressing things up. He's working on the profile board and control panels and the water. A lot of this new section is riverfront, and he's been working these last couple of weeks on painting in the water and getting that dialed in.
I really like the way he does that. It looks so real.
Yeah, it's just painted on there with acrylic.
Who would know, though?
But I love the way he does it. And then, of course, a nice gloss coat over all of that. And there's 2 different rivers that come down through here as well.
I really think it's starting to look great.
It's just beginning to look like a finished railroad.
It is.
You can get your nose right down in here and find amazing, amazing places. Typical of a Steve railroad.
Lots of detail.
Lots of minute little details. And of course, figures, people doing things, in this case, some people fishing in one of the rivers. This whole little boat dock is only about a week old.
Amazing.
Amazing.
That's amazing.
And lights. This is like 2 days ago, he turned on the lights. So we thought we'd show you guys the lights because they just barely came on.
There you go.
So is this a verbatim Bachman, or is it cobbled together, or just what do we
It's
see
almost
here?
a stock Bachman.
Well, I've always thought of Christmas and trains as going together,
They do.
and in this case, the layout going together as well.
That's a great Christmas, though.
And Steve is up here 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and loving every second of it, rebuilding his railroad. I don't think he regrets tearing the old one down at all.
No, I think it was good to have it happen.
Well, isn't that just cool what he's doing?
I think it's wonderful.
It's still way under construction,
Yeah.
where it used to be a pretty much finished railroad.
Is the railroad ever finished, though?
No, and actually I think Steve's getting a kick out of the idea that he gets to start all over.
Yeah, it's fun, actually.
So, he's having a ball.
Get that creative thing going there.
There was a certain emotionality about, there was this amazing railroad, and now it's all torn down, and now it's all coming back. And
Yeah.
the fun thing for Steve is he gets to rethink the whole thing, redesign the whole thing, rebuild the whole thing.
And
'Cause
run trains.
the destination is the journey,
That's right.
is the thing.
Yeah.
Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, do pop over to the channel. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Helps us out, and it won't do you any harm because you can click the notification bell and get notified whenever we upload something. And the easy way to do both, the blue button. Are we ready for it?
Yes.
Zoink! Right there. Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet, and we hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here on Tuesday
Yeah.
with some of that kind of screwing around. See you then.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.